Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Midweek Message. There we go. The light's a little better. It's dark already, so the light in my office is not quite as great, but never mind. Okay, this week, let me see. Let me get my fresh piece of paper, my virtual piece of paper up to chat with you. Here we go. So there we are. I don't know about you, but I find that the world we live in is a noisy and distracted one, for me at any rate. And part of this is all the screens, all of the visuals that are in front of my eyes from morning until night. And a lot of that is my own fault. I admit, I like at night, there's nothing I like better than to snuggle up to Terry and watch television. And I use my computer to write, and I use the internet all the time. I use my phone all the time. It's a beautiful little mini computer. I text people, I check Facebook. And while all of this keeps me in touch with all of you, and I love that, it also is exhausting. Um, and I find that I need those silent times. I need to ground myself. I need to reconnect and I need to disconnect. And I need those quiet music times, those things that feed my soul. I need those outdoor times where the things I hear are peaceful, like the sound of the wind or the squirrels scolding away up in the tree above us in the backyard. And as much as I love to talk, I do also really, really love to listen. And honestly, this did not come naturally. I was a really extroverted kid. I've become much, much more introverted as an adult. And you will all know from talking with me in the sanctuary, I still catch myself, especially in the sanctuary, especially at church, doing something out of nervousness that I consider self centered behavior. For example, one of you will tell me something about your life, and instead of just listening and trying to be present, I relate it back to something about my own life. Whoops. Oops. I want to connect. I want to relate to the person I'm speaking to, but I get nervous. And even though my intention is to sympathize or connect or relate, that more mature part of me knows full well that this is not why the person just shared the story. They didn't want to hear part of my story, they needed to be heard and recognized. And what I did, even though it's a bad habit of mine and I'm aware of it, it wasn't empathy. It was actually really self centered. And I know better. So, with this statement, we know that Stephanie is far from perfect. I am far from perfect. We know that for sure. I mean well, but I get nervous and yeah, I'm not always present in the way that I wish my best self was when I talk with you guys. But I think that this is also part and parcel of the world that we live in. We're not great at listening anymore. We are really good at receiving information. We're good at talking, but we're not always that good at listening or just walking with others, being a witness to their life. And it's not because we don't want to or that we don't wish to do so, but because the noisy and distractive world that we live in doesn't always teach us or give us the tools to do that well. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk with you about today. So, on a spiritual level, when we find ourselves dry, when we are out of steam, out of energy, wishing that we could grow into a better level of groundedness or peace or connection with God, or just better able to recognize that sort of interrelatedness, the interconnectedness of all beings, looking for that divine spark in ourselves and in others. However, it is that you want to label that spiritual growth or your spiritual journey or that need that you might have. I think that the lack of tools that we are given, that lack of teaching about listening deeply also comes into play. So it's not just with each other, but it's also with God. People pray. We do. We all pray. And even our prayers of the people, we can tend to pray transactionally. God, do this for us. God, I'm coming to you because I need this. Or God, please help me with thus and so. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of prayer at all. It's just that it shouldn't be the only prayer that we pray. And if that's our habit, if that's our go to, then there's not a lot of room for connection with God or for growth or real dialogue. And if you think real dialogue with God isn't possible, See, why we need to change the way we pray. So think of it this way. Is that how you would talk to your best friend? Do you only go to your best friend when you need something from them? Well, of course not. Of course not. And you don't just go to your best friend when, yeah, not just when you need something, but when, it's a transaction. Oh, what kind of a friendship would that be? You seek out your best friend because you love them. You like hanging out together. You make each other laugh. You get each other in a way that others just don't. And that gives you that feeling of closeness. And you've shared experiences that nobody else has shared, and you trust each other. It's just nice to be around that person, right? And not just that, you care about their welfare. You care about them. You want to know what's going on with them. You want to be able to help if there's anything wrong. And you know that this person will be someone you always want to be connected to in every stage of your life. You really love them. Well, ideally, prayer should be more like that. Prayer should be an open ended conversation. Prayer should have times where you're just listening and you aren't talking and you're not expecting anything. Now, for those of you who meditate, and lots of us do, for like in yoga or in just a way to calm down, or boy, do we have lots of meditative and contemplative prayer practices, in the Christian tradition too. But I mean, there's also the Buddhist tradition, and lots of us have drawn on that. Meditation, though, can have a similar trap. If you see the purpose of meditation as a way to clear your mind, that's great. I mean, that is one of the things that we're trying to do. But that can be its own trap as well. If it becomes onerous to clear your mind, to bat away all your worrying thoughts, it can become more of a chore than a joy. Stillness can become a rigid act of miserable discipline rather than a freeing joy, which is, of course, what we want. Now, talking about tools for contemplative prayer, Vanita Hampton Wright is an author and an Ignatian uh, prayer person. And here's something that she says when she talks about this. It's a fairly long quote, but it's beautiful. And she is just so wise. I love reading her stuff. She says this: St. Ignatius would tell us that this is a very unfree kind of prayer, and it's not the way one friend talks to another. Spiritual freedom allows us to carry on an open ended conversation with God, who creates us and loves us always and completely. There are no negotiations and hoping against hope that God will be merciful and will give us what we need. We go into the conversation trusting that God already knows our needs and will always care for us. Prayer is a way to be with God, to just be with God, to dwell in that holy space of friendship, to listen and learn, to be inspired and encouraged, to rest in grace and peace. Now she goes on to say, and yes, this is a fairly long quote: the best image I can come up with for spiritually free prayer is the image of my own hands, relaxed and open. Open hands indicate that I am not shaking my fist in anger, wringing my hands in fear, grasping for this moment's want, or clinging to the outcome that I demand. If I come to God in true conversation, confident that God's love, compassion, mercy, justice, and creativity do not shift or change, then I can let go of desperation and reject my urge for negotiation. I can simply be open to holy love, desire, and purpose. Open hands also allow me to ask for what I desire. Open hands do not get in the way of my crying out in pain or frustration. Open hands don't stop my honesty about what life is like for me right now. Open hands don't prevent my complaining. But the posture and the mood are different when my hands are open. I am not shutting down, nor am I shutting out God. I am not so focused on the thing I want that I cannot see other possibilities God is waiting to show me. Try opening your hands physically when you pray this week. See how it feels for your body to be in this open posture. Sometimes the body can help the rest of the person shift. When I open my hands, my emotions adjust toward trust and not fear. When I open my hands, I am saying to God and to myself that I can now offer my gifts freely to God and receive whatever gifts God offers in this moment. End of quote. And thank you, Vanita Hampton Wright, you wonderful wise woman. Okay, so I want to end our time together this week for our midweek moment together by saying that in our noisy and distracted and distracting world, one way to get recentered spiritually is the prayer with open hands, the prayer to a best friend, where listening with an openness to any and all possibilities is how you approach God. And that becomes your norm. That becomes the habit. Finding better ways to listen help us in so many ways, as friends, as partners, as parents, in our relationship with God, certainly as me, as your minister listening to you. Finding better ways to listen is just a great tool. And I think so many possibilities open up when we are able to listen to each other better. And the teaching tools, ways to learn how to do these things better, of praying with open hands. Thank you, Vanita Hampton Wright, for that. That's a great tool to start with. It's a great just way to begin. And I think she's right about shifting our bodies can shift our minds and our hearts and our spirits. And maybe that elusive peace that we seek, especially as we come into the craziness of the holiday season, will be easier to find with tools like this that remind us how to listen, how to reconnect, and to be open to the possibilities of grace. So, with that, this is Reverend Stephanie signing off. I'm in this together with you, and as always, and I will see you on Friday and then on Sunday.